In addition to the JANAP rules for reporting UFO sightings, military personnel also had guidelines laid out for them in Air Force Regulation 200-2. Dated August the 12th, 1954, AFR 200-2 discusses release of facts and states military personnel can inform news media of UFO sightings only when the object has been positively identified as a familiar object. It seems to be just another step in removing the aura of mystery and excitement from the UFO matter. In the history and world sections of this disc, we have several examples of airline pilots who had encounters with UFOs, and these are just a few of the thousands of reports from pilots the world over. In the 1950s, airline reports were so frequent that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had a group called the Joint Communications Electronics Committee draft a military regulation that would apply to civilian pilots. It was called JANAP, or Joint Army-Navy Air Force Publication. It was imposed on February the 17th, 1954 in Los Angeles. JANAP 146 outlines procedures for reporting vital intelligence sightings. And strangely enough, even though various branches of the military had often said that UFOs were nonsense, UFOs were listed separately from aircraft and missiles. The document takes special care to remind civilian and military pilots that these reports contain information vital to national defense and that revealing such information amounts to espionage. Persons who discussed their sightings were liable for a prison term of up to 10 years and for a fine of $10,000. Most commercial pilots ignored the JANAP rules and they proved to be unenforceable. However, the JANAP regulations are a good example of how the military tried to keep the lid of secrecy shut tight on the UFO phenomenon. The Robertson Panel and its report on unidentified flying objects marked the beginning of a new method of dealing with UFO sightings. It was called planned debunking. In 1952, a wave of UFO sightings swept across the United States. After the overflights of Washington, D.C. in July, public interest in UFOs was high. The CIA recommended to the Intelligence Advisory Committee that a secret panel of scientists be convened to evaluate the evidence of UFOs. The panel consisted of the names you see listed here. The panel meetings were held at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. from January the 14th through the 17th, 1953. Although the meeting dates show they had 3 days of discussions, these men met for a total of only 12 hours during that period. 12 hours to review and analyze at least 8 years of UFO data. In part, their conclusions were, reasonable explanations could be suggested for most sightings, and there was no evidence of a direct threat to national security in the objects sighted. The panel expressed a fear that an overexcited public might be more susceptible to enemy psychological warfare and overload emergency communications channels with false information. So, the panel recommended that a policy of debunking UFO reports should be started. The panel also suggested that civilian UFO organizations should be watched because of potentially great influence on mass thinking. And these are the final recommendations. In the perilous times of the early 1950s, concern for national security and fear of nuclear attack were proper attitudes. Yet the policy of secrecy and UFO debunking continues to this day and has caused incredible pain and suffering to thousands of UFO witnesses worldwide. This memo was written by Wilbert B. Smith, senior radio engineer with the Canadian Department of Transport, and is one of the most important documents concerning UFOs to ever be released from Canada. It confirms the existence of the high security classification of UFO information. Smith was a respected scientist who believed flying saucers would prove eventually to be an introduction to a new technology. His memo was dated November the 21st, 1950. Less than 2 weeks later, on December the 2nd, the Department of Transportation acted on his recommendations and established Project Magnet, a Canadian study of the UFO matter.